Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 76 of the Solosaurus podcast. I'm Michael Eckenfels.
And I'm Martin Gonzalez.
Today, we are talking about Architects of the West Kingdom, a multiplayer competitive worker placement game for 1 to 5 players with a card-driven solo mode.
This game is designed by Shem Phillips and S.J. McDonald, with art and graphic design by Mihailo Dmitrievsky, more popularly known in the industry as the Miko. And that's how we're going to refer to Mihailo throughout this podcast, because it's easier to pronounce the Miko, although we love you and we love your art style. And this game is published by Garphill Games.
This podcast is brought to you by Stone Valley Games, your friendly, distant game store. Check them out at stonevalleygames.com. It's a great shop because most of the games they carry over there are great for solo players. So we invite you to go check them out, and especially because he's always adding new content to the storefront, and it's important, as always, to support a small, family-run, solo-friendly game store. And now, the news. This solo news is brought to you by TableFor1.me, where the Solosaurus podcast exclusively gets its one-player game news. Thanks as always to Frederick Schultz of TableFor1.me for his ongoing efforts to bring us solo gaming news. And by the way, you can also read his solo gaming news blog on a Board Game Geek. We will add that link in the show notes as well. Martin, take it away.
All right, our first item, I'm super excited by this, is called Alien: Fate of the Nostromo. So coming on the heels of Aliens: Another Glorious Day in the Core and Aliens: Bug Hunt, both of which we have reviewed on this show, we get another Alien game. Now this time, this one is based on the first movie from 1979, directed by Ridley Scott, which doesn't ever get enough love and credit for starting the whole Alien franchise, in my opinion. So this is a 1 to 5 player game designed by Scott Rogers from publisher Ravensburger. And in Fate of the Nostromo, you take on the role of iconic characters such as Ripley, Parker, Lambert, Brett, or Dallas. And I got to tell you, Michael, just saying those names, it gives me goosebumps. They're just iconic characters, you know. Yeah. The idea, the opportunity to kind of play them is giving me a very pleasurable tingling sensation all over my body. So anyway, in Fate of the Nostromo, you collect scraps, you craft items, and you fulfill different objectives. And whenever you encounter the alien on board the Nostromo, you lose morale. If your morale ever drops to 0, you lose the game. Now, in a cool thematic twist, if you want a greater challenge of this game, you have the option of introducing the treacherous science officer Ash, who moves around the ship, taking resources away and thus further lowering crew morale. Michael, I think I know the answer to this question, but how do you feel about Alien: Fate of the Nostromo?
You know that meme of the guy walking with his girlfriend and he's turning to look at this other girl going by and he's going, ooh, and she's looking at him like, huh?
I'm very familiar with that meme.
Yeah, the girlfriend is my game collection, and the other girl is Alien: Fate of the Nostromo. So yeah, I wonder where Jones the cat is, though. That would be cool if they could add him to it. But right. You don't know anybody at Ravensburger, do you?
No, sadly I do not.
Well, maybe we can get our hands on this for a solo review. That would be awesome. I was checking out. Yeah, this is obviously a no-brainer for me as well. I mean, it's the Alien game, the original, the one that really started it all. And if it does any kind of justice to the movie at all, it'll be a fantastic game, I bet. I looked at the BGG page for this. And it's always kind of annoying when you see a game that hasn't come out yet and there's already 5 ratings on it. So that kind of confuses me. But also, somebody's got a sense of humor. I don't know if you've seen that page yet. Somebody did a Photoshop of all the pieces surfing for some reason. I thought that was hilarious.
Because there are miniatures in this game.
Yes. They look good too. And somebody said it was Horrified Plus. It looked like Horrified Plus. And I thought, it's the same company, right? But I don't think it's the same designer.
That's not a bad thing.
Horrified
is a pretty good game.
Yeah, I mean, that would be cool. That would be really cool. So it makes me wonder too if we're hitting the saturation threshold with alien type games, but that's no, we're not. Publishers, we're not. Keep it up. I'm perfectly fine with that.
We're okay with more alien games, aliens games.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll review them all, man. Bring them on. Come on.
Man, this is exciting to me. Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're fine. Yeah, it is absolutely exciting. I greatly look forward to this. I think it says August 1st, right?
Yes, 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 yes. That is when it's going to be available. So that
That's
mark your calendars.
that's so long to wait, though.
It's going to be here
Anyway,
before you know it.
yeah, probably. That's
All right.
cool. So we got also Eon's End: Legacy of Gravehold currency currently
Mm.
on Kickstarter. As we record this episode, it's a 1 to 4 player cooperative game designed by Kevin Riley, Sydney Engelstein, and Nick Little from publisher Indie Boards and Cards. It is the second game in the Eon's End Legacy series, bringing to an epic conclusion the story that began in the highly regarded Eon's End Legacy game from a couple of years back. Now, I got to ask, Eon's End Legacy, is that the main Eon's End game, or is there a different Eon's End game? I know you have it, right?
I have the first game, or actually the second edition of the first game. That's the only box of this series that I own.
Okay.
There's a lot. There's a lot
Okay.
of content now.
So it's not two separate games. It's not Eon's End, and then there's also Eon's End Legacy. It's the same
The,
thing.
It is.
Okay. All right.
So
Cool.
very briefly, yeah. So they came out with Aeon's End Second Edition, and then the kind of standalone expansion, which is the name is escaping me right now, War Eternal, and then they launched Aeon's End Legacy on Kickstarter in 2018. Very
Okay.
successful. Lots of people love it. So this is the follow up to that Kickstarter, Aeon's End Legacy.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, we won't give any spoilers on this particular game, but in this new one, there is going to be a conflict between the Mages of Gravehold and Rebel factions. And the Legacy of Gravehold has a deeper, more immersive narrative with the branching paths, which I think is sounds really cool. After each game, players receive experience. Then they spend that experience on enhancement stickers, those along with player cards as well, which allow them to become more powerful. However, the nemesis that the players face will also grow stronger and stronger with each battle. The Legacy of Gravehold has more than twice as many mages as all previous base sets and more than twice as many nemesis as well. Martin, what are your thoughts on Legacy of Gravehold?
Wow. Okay, so there's a lot for me to cover here, but I'll try to compress it. So number one, Aeon's End Legacy, or rather Aeon's End Second Edition, has always been at the very, very top of my favorite games list. It's a deck builder. It's a co-op deck builder. It works great multiplayer. It works great solo because each nemesis has its own unique kind of strike and attack and minions, and they're all super thematic. And each nemesis attacks you in a different way, just like a great boss battle in these classic video games, right? Where you have to, they all have a different weakness and you got to figure it out. So you're going to die a lot first before you figure out, okay, I need to change my strategy this way to be able to take out this one, which was different from the last boss, et cetera, et cetera. So there's, and the other thing about Aeon's End is that every game, once you're familiar with the system, every game reliably finishes in about 45 minutes. It's like you get on a good, high quality roller coaster ride, and you know exactly what's going to happen, and you know exactly how long it's going to take, and there's going to be thrills and chills and, like screaming, and then it ends. And it's. So yeah, it's a really, really tightly designed game. I could go on. We're not reviewing Aeon's End, folks. This is just a news item. However, on the flip side, and a lot of people are going to be shocked if they hear me say this, I didn't back Aeon's End Legacy single tier, and so I have not actually. And now at this point, like a couple of years down the road, there's so much content, and there's so many different boxes that it's like a lot of people are like. On BGG, you'll find a lot of questions like, where do I jump in? What's a good jumping in point? And so I'm feeling a little bit of that being overwhelmed. And I'm like, I'm going to stick. I haven't even finished. I have Aeon's End Second Edition. I have War Eternal. I've finished all the Nemesis in Second Edition. I have no problem replaying that box. I have War Eternal. I've played one Nemesis there, so there's 3 others. And so I don't know. It's like, I'm still working through these original boxes from like 2018, so I'm not ready to spend on and jump on Legacy or Legacy of Gravehold. It sounds really cool. I love this game. I'm just not ready. That's how I feel about it.
That's interesting. I mean, I don't know. I know you have the original and you love the game. I never bought it. I just have had too many other games to look at and cover and play, and I still haven't pulled the trigger on this yet. But I would like to eventually.
Well, it seems to me, and I think connected to like when we reviewed Warp's Edge, I think you're not really that big of a fan of deck builders. Is that a true
No, I'm
statement?
not. But
Yeah.
I am not in general. But like I said, some of them grow on me. Like, I had Marvel Champions. I played that. I didn't really like it. I hate to say it, but I didn't like 51st State that much. Some of these games I'm willing to try them. I'm not saying I hate them entirely. I'm kind of standoffish, I should say.
By the way, for the sake of a couple of people who will now violently react to you categorizing Marvel Champions or 51st State as deck builders, those are not deck builders. But we're not going to get into that right now. This is not, because then we
Hey.
could do a 5-hour podcast on why they're not deck builders.
People can say whatever they want about me. I don't care. How many times can I say the word war game? War game, war game, war game, war game. Okay, there we go. Now y'all have to drink every time I say that. So,
oh look, the Solosaurus drinking game. Every time Michael mentions war game, we have to take a shot.
Right, and any children that are listening, please be sure that you
That's
drink
a shot of
Sun.
chocolate milk. Okay,
Chocolate
that's what
milk,
I
yes.
meant. Oh
I
my
would do
gosh!
that over. I'd do that over alcohol. Shoot, I'd rather have some quick myself. That's good stuff, man. All right, sorry, totally going off track here.
Okay, our final news item is Everdell Mistwood. So Mistwood is a brand new expansion to Everdell, the popular game of worker placement, card drafting, and hand management from 2018, featuring woodland critters. And Mistwood brings a new solitaire mode because the original Everdell already supported 1 to 4 players. Now, this new solitaire mode reportedly features a more dynamic automated opponent called Nightweave. And according to publisher Starling Games, Nightweave is designed to function just like a real player. She has her own hand of cards. She prepares for seasons on her own schedule, and she has her own agenda. Nightweave has her own big critter meeple, along with 8 spider meeples that will move about the board to do her bidding. They're going to block locations. They're going to take events away from you before you can get them. And they're even going to enact plots and plans that'll interfere with your options as a player. And if that's not enough, the publisher says that Nightweave has 8 different personalities that will influence what she targets and focuses on, so that promises a lot of variety and replayability in the gameplay. Everdell Mistfall is on Kickstarter as we are recording this episode. So, Michael, have you ever played Everdell, and what do you think about this new solo expansion?
I mean, anything that's a solo expansion sounds good. Everdell I have not played, but I have heard of it. It's funny because I know it has nothing to do with it, but it reminds me of Mice and Mystics, which is a game I do own and have enjoyed greatly. And that it uses little animals, but it's more of an RPG type adventure game. It's not a worker placement card drafting type game. So I know that they're totally different. I do know some things, guys. Not much, admittedly, but this particular case I do. Everdell, I also noticed, maybe I'm looking in the wrong places, but it fetches really high prices online. And that's another reason why I've stayed away from it for now. But I do like the theme, just not enough to shell out big cash for it, at least not now. I might eventually pick it up, though. I mean, it is on my radar.
Yeah. I'm looking at BGG Market right now, and you can pick up a second edition 2020 version for $47.
That's not bad.
But it doesn't mention shipping, so yeah.
Right. It's coming from the UK, so it'll be $150.
No, it's based in the US.
Yeah.
I too have not played Everdell, but I have always been curious.
Yes.
It is a medium weight a worker placement game, and as you may or may not know, as listeners may or may not know, I have recently been on a worker placement kick. I have now been playing almost exclusively worker placement games or hybrid worker placement games for the last 3 or 4 months. And you know, as someone who has not really been a fan of worker placement prior to this year, I've been kind of like exploring all the different options. So this is why you tell me that Everdell has worker placement. I'm like, I'm very interesting. Strokes chin. I'm very interested. Now, and it has card drafting, which is I'm a fan of that mechanism as well. Some of my favorite games involve card drafting, like It's a Wonderful World, Fantastic Factories, those types of things. In fact, the game that we're going to review today features a little bit of drafting at the beginning. Architects. So
Wait,
yeah,
it
does. It's a very. We can talk about it a little later, but yeah, the start when you're choosing buildings to start with. You do a little bit of a drafting thing. All right, so yeah. So I'm excited about Everdell. I'm not as excited as either Eon's End Legacy of Gravehold or Alien Fate of the Nostromo, but yeah, it's okay.
Woo! We're not excited about that at all. You can go. Come on, August. Come on, August. Okay.
All right. So that was our news.
That was our news. And now, here's our review of Architects of the West Kingdom. So this game is interesting to me in that it's set at the end of the Carolingian Empire. I knew I was going to blow that, around 850 AD. This is an empire that's a Frankish dominated empire in Western Europe. When I say Frankish, mostly like modern day France and western part of Germany, that kind of thing. It lasted about 100 years, from 880 along to about 888 AD. So this takes place about in the middle there, where players are all royal architects looking to impress the king by collecting raw materials, hiring apprentices, and assigning their workforce to build structures to earn victory points. The players can also choose to be virtuous or evil, which will impact how they gather and earn in the game. The ultimate goal really is for players to work on the Archbishop's Cathedral, which will earn them a lot of victory points if they can advance it far enough. During your turn, you place workers, you earn resources, you build things, you hire apprentices to further your architectural aspirations. And, that's about the nutshell I can put it in. So, Martin, what are your initial thoughts on the game?
Yeah. On the surface, it seems like a standard worker placement game with a twist. And the twist is, unlike most worker placement games I've recently played, so most worker placement games, you start with a limited number of workers, usually 3, 4, 5, and then perhaps you get the opportunity to add to that number as you play. Now, Architects flips this. In Architects of the West Kingdom, you start with all of your workers, all 20 of them. And that's all the workers you're ever going to get in this game, folks. So use them wisely. So that was a nice reversal, and kind of like a change-up thing. Now, as you mentioned, as a player, your ultimate goal in this game is to win by scoring the most victory points at the end of the game. It's a very standard kind of worker placement Euro goal. And you do this mainly by constructing buildings for the greater glory of the king. And, as you mentioned, another option is to help in building the Grand Cathedral. Here's the rub, however. Each time you build a building or a section of the cathedral, you have to sacrifice one of your precious workers by placing them permanently at the guild hall. So kind of, I guess, thematically, what it is, you have to, like, I don't know, maybe a worker retires every time you build a building. I don't know. So, but it's like Wingspan from Stonemaier games, in that sense that as you progress in the game, your number of workers, or in Wingspan, your number of action tokens gets reduced by 1. So your options become tighter and more limited as you play. So I thought that was one source of tension and tough choices in this game, as you're only got tougher as the further you went on. I'm going to say this, it's almost like a reverse engine builder to me. So whereas with most worker placement games, your options open up as you play, in Architects, your options tend to dwindle because you lose workers to the guild hall. The guild hall also acts as a game timer. Once you place the required number of workers there, representing the set number of buildings or cathedral sections to be built, then you trigger the game's end. And that is kind of cool in that, when it's printed there in the guild hall on the board, there are outlines there that say for 3 players, for 4 players, for 5 players. So you can adjust the number of workers you must place at the guild hall. So you're basically adjusting the game timer based on the number of players. So I thought that was kind of cool. However, as you might expect, the buildings that you manage to build, either give you an instant benefit or a bonus as you build it, like more resources, or you get an end game benefit that'll, factor into your victory points at the end of the game. So I thought there's a nice mix of short-term benefits and long-term benefits that you have to consider as you're deciding, which building do I build? Which one do I go after first? Which resources am I going to go after based on the buildings that I've decided I want to build first? And you kind of have to balance, I'm going after like these easy to build buildings that'll give me stuff early on versus these, harder to build buildings with more requirements. And I'm not sure if I can build it, but if I actually manage to build it, wow, that's going to give me a big VP bump at the end. So I thought those things were cool about it. And aside from the twist of starting with all 20 of your workers, this game features a couple of other twists to the standard worker placement formula, such as if you place a worker at the town hall and you pay the required fee, you can capture all workers at a particular location, either your opponent's workers or, and I just, this was refined for me last night, your own workers. You can capture your own workers. Either way, the workers you capture, you place them back on your player board. This is the main way to actually get your workers back from the board, from the main board to your player board, so that you could place them again. I didn't even realize that you can capture your own workers. I guess thematically, it's like you're the lord of this little fiefdom, and you're like, okay, my workers, I'm gonna like pretend to everybody that I'm capturing them, and I won't reveal who I am, but I'm gonna redeploy them. So there's some. It's a worker placement game that does some interesting and different things, I thought.
That's very good. You nailed it on the head there, I think. I mean, that's pretty much the whole game. I mean, that's an excellent overview of it. So let's look at the components of the game. There's, without going into great detail like we have in the past, there's a lot of really thematic resource pieces: clay, wood, stone, silver, gold, marble. I really like them because they all look different. It's a very tactile experience in manipulating them. The wood looks like tree branches, the clay looks like bricks, and so on. There's player markers in worker pieces. I believe there's 100 workers and 20 of them each. As you mentioned, there's 20 total for you. So there's 5 total players there. There's tons and tons of cards. You've got multiplier, debt, black market, reward, apprentice, and building cards. Double-sided player boards, which are really cool, and a large, very well-drawn main board. Now, I like the design and the artwork. The resource pieces, as I said, are outstanding, give excellent feel to the game. The artwork by the Miko is very interesting to me as well. Though I've seen some people complain on BGG about it for being overused, but to me, I'm kind of new to this series. I've not played Raiders of the North Seas either, which is my understanding he's another game he has done art for. It's one I would love to try too myself, but to me, being new, it's all new and fresh to me. Very Samurai Jack feel to it.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's outstanding. I mean, I like the art. I like the art style. I like the art style in the other games as well. So I think it's new and fresh to me. So Martin, what are your thoughts on those components?
Yeah, I'm not gonna. I kind of agree with everything you mentioned. I will say that the resource pieces are made of wood, little wooden tokens, and
Yes.
they are nice. But if you play a lot of worker placement games, they're fairly standard. Almost every worker placement or Euro game, requires some sort of like resource gathering, and the resources are going to be made of wood, and they're going to be nice little, nicely, interestingly shaped pieces of wood for the most part. And so there's nothing different about that in this game. And the cards are standard, they're not like linen finish or anything like that. The thing with the double-sided player boards is that you have one side of them, which is like all the players start with the same capabilities. And when you first start playing, you are recommended, the rules recommend, start with that side first. Now, once you've got a couple of games under your belt, then if you feel like it, you can flip them over. And then now you start getting into each player board starts with an asymmetric benefit. So you start the game with a different, strength or advantage, and then you can kind of like see how that changes your strategy versus your, as you play the game. So that's kind of cool. But yeah, and then okay, so I am someone who, this is not my first experience with the Miko's artwork. It's very, very nice artwork, but I have now encountered it in all of the Valyria games. So card kingdoms of Valyria, villages of Valyria, quests of Valyria. Every single one featured the Miko art, and I recently tried to play other games of this series, the West Kingdom series, and they all feature. So I'm a little bit over it, It's really, really nice, but I've seen it a bit too much. So that's just my personal reaction to it now. It's not a selling point anymore for me. If I see a game has art by this particular person, it's really great though.
Yeah, I can totally see that. So the rules. The rule book, it's, well, I say only 20 pages. 20 pages can be an eternity for some folks. For me, it's not really that bad because it's well designed, I think, and it's colorful. There's lots of examples of play and such in there. But I can't get over the feeling that it feels like it's twice that length. Just that there's a lot going on. I mean, the thing too that's a little standoffish for me is that you've got the main game. Here's your 20-page rule book for multiplayer play. Oh, you want to play it solo? Okay, here's your appendix of 2 pages in the back that tells you how to play it solo. And it feels like it's just kind of tacked on as an afterthought. It's as if we're missing a huge chunk of the potential of the game because you read through all this stuff and all the things and all the machinations and everything that can go on between players, and then oh yeah, here's the solo part. So I'm kind of I'm not too sure about that as soon as I enter the game, and it feels as if there's just a lot to learn. I mean, I get that point of having that 20 pages there because that's the rules, and then here's how you do it solo. Oh, that makes sense. It just seems like there's a lot to learn and a lot to process and a lot to keep track of. And I think that comfort with that only comes from several different plays. But, that's pretty normal for any game, I think. Maybe I'm off base. I don't know. Martin, what are your thoughts?
I 100% agree with you, Michael. So people may not know this, but you and I are both instructional designers in real life. I don't know if you wanted to disclose that, Michael. I just outed you. Yes,
No, it's fine.
we are part of the secret cabal of instructional designers. So we basically what it is we are in the business of creating training for people, and so I can't help but look at every kind of game rule book with that instructional designer lens, and so from that lens, I agree with you that the rules as written make this game seem more complicated than it really is. And
Mhm.
so, a couple of specific things that it's missing, in my opinion, are an effective turn sequence overview, right? Like, very standard. In most rule books, you're going to have a kind of summary at the start of the turn sequence section to tell you, as an overview, your turn is going to look like this. You're going to place a worker, and then you get the benefits, right? Or you're going to try to build a building by discarding your resources. Da, 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 da. I missed that in these rules. It really jumps right into, here are some key concepts that you need to keep in mind if you're new to this game, and it just like dives into the conceptual stuff, and then it goes into detail on what each space of the board, what you can do there and what you can get to. So I think that it's not very well organized, and because really, once you actually have played this game, gotten a few turns under your belt, you'll realize that it's not that difficult or heavy of a game. It's not that complex.
Mhm.
But the rules make it seem more complex than it actually is. And the other thing I'll say about the rules is it's tough if you are looking for something during play, and that. So I was um, full disclosure, I was playing this again with my daughter last night, just to refresh myself. It wasn't solo. I'm sorry, folks. But I needed somebody else there to kind of be a sanity check for me. And she had questions. It's like, okay, so this building, and she'd show me the card. What does this icon mean? And I'm like, oh, let me look through the rules because I don't know off the top of my head. And it would take me a lot longer than usual to find the actual. It's there. It's just not very well organized, so it makes it tougher to find. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I think that they could have spent more time kind of giving us overviews and then specifics. And I think that they could have also included a quick reference section or like a 1 page sheet, like how other rule books. And we had this critique about the Warp's Edge rulebook as well when we reviewed it a few episodes back. It did not have a 1 pager, and here's what you can do, like rule summary. This game doesn't have it either. You know what I mean? And I think this is the time when I'm going to complain about the iconography because a lot of people love the iconography of the Garphill games, of the Shem Phillips games. Justifiably so. They're very, very nice icons. Here's the thing about them: they do not really resemble real world referenced objects. You know what I mean? What
Mhm.
I mean is, in my humble opinion, good iconography is intuitive. When you see the icon, it already, even without reading it, it already kind of already suggests the thing that it's standing in for. You know what I mean? Um,
Yes.
and the thing with the Garp Hill Games iconography is that it doesn't always do that. Now, once you're familiar with it, once you've grokked the particular meaning that Shem Phillips has assigned to each of these unfamiliar icons, when you encounter them again, you're like, oh, okay, I know that purple kind of metal looking thing with the slash going through it means that I lose virtue. Okay, cool. I know that now, but that doesn't look like anything in the real world. You know what I mean? It doesn't
Mhm.
actually look like a real world medal. It looks like a kind of stylized ribbon that looks purple. So you know what I mean? Like there's this extra cognitive load when you
Mhm.
have iconography, very nicely designed iconography that is only consistent and meaningful inside the world of these West Kingdom games and these North Sea games. If once you're familiar and immersed in that world, they make sense, but they don't make intuitive sense when you're just looking at them and you're not yet familiar. So it increases the cognitive load when you're trying to learn the game. You're also trying to wrap your head around the icons, and it makes it tougher. In my humble opinion, as an instructional designer of 15 years, yes, I'm going to pull the "this is my experience" card. Fight me.
Well, you're not wrong. I mean, as instructional designers or want to know, people are wanting to learn what they need to learn and just be done with it. I mean, especially in corporate environment, they've got full-time jobs, they've got things to do. They need bam, bam, bam. Let's get that info that we need and let's move on. And gamers are much the same. They want to dive in and play. They don't want to sit there. Okay, I got to refer to this role. Okay, what was that icon again? That kind of thing. You want to be able to look at something and visualize it immediately. And yeah, I mean, I've done that same thing. I've had that challenge myself, and it's not an easy task to accomplish. But in our experience, it's fun when it all comes together, and it just really didn't come together here.
No.
Yeah,
No, plus
so
which the other thing, like the last thing I'll say about the icons, my last rant about the icons is okay, so you've created your own kind of internally consistent world of icons. Great, that's fine for you. At least give me a one pager that defines that shows me a picture of the icons and then defines each one. So that if I have a question about an icon, which I will because it's not familiar and doesn't refer to anything in the real
yes,
world, I can look at that one page. It's not there. It's not
yep,
there. So really, this game expects you to just learn them as you play. You know what I mean? And
hmm
and so it didn't set me up for success because I didn't have the references to be able to like ease my learning curve. And I will
hmm
say this. I've played this game many times. It came out in 2018. I first played it a couple of times at Origins 2019 with some solo gamers over there. With some solo. I played multiplayer. I played multiplayer with fellow solo gamers at Origins 2019, and then I bought my own copy almost a year later, and then I played it several times with both the easy and hard versions of the solo AI deck. I had to relearn. I did not remember what those icons meant from Origins, from the time I played Origins to the time I played it last year. And then this
hmm
year, when I was preparing for this podcast and playing it again, I had to relearn the icons again because I'd forgotten them from last year when I last played it. I looked in my BG Stats app on my phone. And I'm like, wow, it's been the last time I played this was June 2020. I'm like, wow, how time flies. It's bananas. But yeah, so they don't stick. The icons don't stick in
nope,
your memory
no,
because they don't look like their real world counterparts, folks. Hear me
yep.
now, believe me later, publishers. If you're gonna make iconography, good iconography is intuitive and it looks like real world things that normal people are already familiar with. Take that to the bank.
Yep. Yeah, and that almost killed the game for me. I mean, just utterly frustrated me to a point where I was just like, "What is this? Where? How does this? What?" I was almost just gave up on it because of the iconography
Yeah.
myself, and that's bad. That shouldn't be a thing. We talked about the gameplay to this point, but let's talk a little bit more about that here. And ultimately, I really wish I could get more excited about this game, as excited as you are. And not, I just, I made it clear in the past that I'm kind of standoffish when it comes to deck building games. I'm not open to them, but I'm just kind of not sure about that. So I too am the same way about worker placement type of games. The only real experience I've had previous was a game called Stone Age, but on my iPad,
Hmm.
not the board game, which was an okay time. It's a little bit of a time waster and not really a totally immersive experience. Architects, I think, is much more advanced than Stone Age. It has a lot more window dressing than Stone Age. It gives you a lot more options, but it feels like it's pretty derivative to me just because you're gathering resources X, Y, and Z, then you're spending them to get resources A and B, or you're building buildings and hiring apprentices that make your life a little bit easier, give you other resources, give you, to reduce your costs, whatever. Really, I got to say, really overall, I wish I could get more excited about this game. I've made it clear in the past that I'm kind of standoffish about deck builders because it's if that comes out in the description, I'm kind of not sure about that. I'm willing to try it because there are some good ones out there. There are some good deck building war games. Actually, I can think of a few like Warfighter by DVG,
Hmm.
which is a pretty cool one. So I'm kind of the same way about worker placement type games because my only real experience, and this is on me, not on the games, of course, is my experience with Stone Age, which is on my iPad, though not the board game itself, which I thought was an okay time waster. Not really an immersive experience. Architects, though, has a lot more window dressing and a lot more options for play than Stone Age does, at least in my opinion. It still feels like it's pretty much the same thing, just in a different cover. Or yeah, so you're gathering resources X, Y, Z, spending them to gain resources A and B, gathering all of that to spend to build buildings and hire apprentices, which decreases your costs or gives you other resources. I it's kind of samey for me, and I'm sure I'm in the minority here. It's just kind of in that regard. I do like that you can get more resources by ultimately placing more workers in some spaces. That multiplayer is really cool, but the danger of them getting swept up by another player or even by yourself is kind of a nice option, as you mentioned. But getting them swept up and stolen away is a mechanism that I see as balancing, but in the game, in the theme of the game, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's like, okay, you got too many people, you're loitering, move along. What's all this then? I'm going to kidnap all your guys and take them over to my board and then throw them in jail later. What? How does that work? I get it as a balance mechanism. It makes complete sense. But in the theme of the game, it's like, why does this exist? It's really weird. That's a really, yeah, that's all I can really think of on that. Martin, how about you? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think that your reaction to the game is very valid, right? And I think that it's very clear that this is not really your style of game, just like deck builder is not really your style of game, and so therefore your reaction, your like lukewarm reaction, is internally consistent. Here's how I reacted to this game, and it's kind of undergone an evolution. When I first played this game at Origins in 2019, as I mentioned earlier, I didn't know what was going on because to that point, I'd only primarily played like thematic games. Eldritch Horror was my favorite at the time. Aeon's End. So I was like super into deck builders and super into like um, just games with a very strong theme, and I really hadn't played any worker placement games, and so this was introduced to me by a fellow solar gamer, Jamie Jameson, and we played it at Origins, and I'm like, I don't know what's happening. I don't understand. It was an
Right.
unfamiliar
Yep.
game style to me, and we were kind
Hmm.
of rushing because we wanted to jam. We only had a limited amount of time with each other, and we wanted to cram as much game plays and different types of games as we possibly could. So, and just for anybody who's ever considering attending a game convention, like if in the future when things settle down and in-person game conventions can be safely held once again, um, it's not the best place to learn games, okay? Because things are going to be happening very fast, and there's a lot of noise
Hmm.
and excitement going on
Yep.
around
Yep.
you. So it wasn't the best. It wasn't the best environment. Um, but it tickled my brain, and so eventually I bought my own copy when I found a good deal on it, of course, because in my other guys I am never pay full price for for games. I always wait for the deals. So about a year later I bought my own copy and I started playing it solo, and I'm like, this is nice. This is at that by that point I'd played more worker placement games, but I was still dipping my toe into it. So this is a family weight. This is I would categorize this game as a Gateway Plus worker placement game. So you mentioned Stone Age. games like Stone Age or Lords of Waterdeep, which by the way are not soloable, those
No.
are kind of like on the lighter side. Those are definitely gateway games. In fact, I tried to introduce my family to Stone Age a few months back. It was disastrous. They hated it.
That's a shame.
I know. But I felt that okay, so this is like a slight step up. You have more options, like you mentioned, and it's got these little twists that I wasn't used to. The whole reversal where you start with all your workers and they can be captured. So thematically, especially if you're playing the AI, by the way, the AI opponents love to capture your workers. Oh my gosh, it's
Yes.
so
Oh, gosh.
frustrating.
Yes.
But as you
Mm.
mentioned, it's not a game killer for you because if the AI captures your workers and they go to prison, on your next turn you have the opportunity to get them to spring them free from prison, and you don't have to pay anything. So then you're like, okay, that was a temporary inconvenience, but now I have my workers back. You know what I mean? So it becomes like a bad thing in the moment because it upsets your near term plans, but it also sets you up for being able to do more things a couple of turns down the road once you get those workers back from jail. So it's kind of like a mixed blessing. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
my feeling about this game was pretty high, pretty positive last year when when I was looking, when I was exactly my evolution in worker placement games as I was growing and learning and slowly bumping up in complexity, and this was just at the right level of complexity. I think BGG has at about a 2.78 complexity, and I think that's right. So it's on the higher side of a medium light worker placement game. And then fast forward to now. At this point, I wouldn't consider myself a worker placement veteran by any means, but I've now started to play worker placement games like Newton. What else have I tried to play? Viscounts of the West Kingdom, which didn't go so well. My point is, I've started.
Uh,
Lorenzo Il Magnifico, all solo, by the way. Even though Lorenzo doesn't have an official solo mode, but that's okay. Um, and so I've started to play worker placement games that are now edging into the higher medium or medium heavy complexity. So now, based on my evolution as a gamer, I revisited Architects, and I'm like, it's a little bit too light for my taste now, which is weird, right? Like over 2 years, I went from I don't know what this game is all about to hey, this game is exactly the right fit for me, and now I'm like, this game is not enough for me. So that's kind of like where my head is at now with Architects. It's a little bit
okay.
too light. However, I will say, if you are a family level, kind of you're looking for a nice kind of like introductory worker placement game to play with your family that's a little bit more complex than a Stone Age or a Lords of Waterdeep, this one is perfect for that. And it's got nice, super great, attractive artwork, nice colors on the board, very appealing. The iconography, once you get used to it, is very very nice and consistent. And it's just a nice quality package. It's I would say best of breed for introductory worker placement games. That's my reaction to the game.
That's a good one. I mean, I would say my own personal self, I would start with like if you're not used to any kind of worker placement games and you've never played one, I'd say Stone Age or Lords of Waterdeep. I forgot about that one. I have that one on my iPad as well. Not soloable, but you can play it against the AI, of course, on your iPad. So I don't know. I think this was a little too even complex, but I see what you're saying from a state of advancing along, and even at this point, making this as kind of a being too simple for you. I totally understand where you're coming from there. For somebody like me, this might be a little too much. It makes me wonder too if I'm going to like Viscounts or Viscounts rather or Paladins.
Yeah.
Uh, we also have in the pipeline for reviewing at some point,
At some
and
point, we're not going to tell you
right.
exactly when.
No, it'll be a surprise. As always. Yeah, I'm like, if this is the lighter
Yeah,
version,
those are much
and
heavier.
I have, yeah, I'm gonna be. Am I gonna have a good time with these? But hey, open mind. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
So good, bad, and
Hmm.
ugly. I have a few here to talk about. Starting with the good, I do, as I said, like how the worker placement works. The more you place, the more resources you get. That multiplier is kind of a cool thing, but the chances increase of your workers being captured. That's kind of a neat little restriction. I mentioned, how it's thematically weird, but it still works gameplay wise. The solo bot, as you said, is more often than not going to snag up your workers at the most inopportune possible time. I think there's a lot of those cards in that deck, the Automa deck. I do like the apprentices and the gameplay options it does give you. It gives you options for different incomes, different resources, different things that you critically need during the game. But that can be a problem because sometimes you get cards that you just have no interest in, and they're just all laid out there, and you have no interest in tapping any of them. But the solo bot does help in that regard. Sometimes he'll come through and clean house and take a couple out of the way. So he'll be like, "Oh, nice! I can now put some architects I might actually use in there." So that's kind of cool too. Martin, what? Yeah, I think you like this game, but I'm going to say, what do you have any particular good points you'd like to call out for architects for
Yeah,
the West
let me
Kingdom?
summarize. I think that it's a worker placement game that is a slightly above family weight complexity. So if you want to get a stretch in there, stretch yourself a little bit, this is a good step up, I think. Um, and so just enough complexity. That's a good thing. It's a very beautiful on the table, appealing artwork, appealing graphic design, nicely designed icons. From that standpoint. What else can I say about about the game? I mean, it's fun. It's fun both solo and it's fun both multiplayer. And I also like the fact that the solo is basically just a deck of cards, and at the end of the day, you flip over an AI card and you do what is printed on there. So it's not onerous. It's not. It doesn't put a lot of load on you as a solo player to really operate the game and enjoy it solo. And you can really focus on just working on your own kingdom and doing your little buildings and working on your cathedral and having to suffer getting captured by the AI every so often. So those are the kinds of good things there. Yeah. So yeah, those I think I'll stop there for good.
Well, that's interesting. You mentioned that going segueing into bad. The Automa deck. It's really, as you said, it's not difficult, but there's not to me. There's not a
Hmm.
lot to it. So I'm speaking my negatives for this game mostly from the solo experience, not from the multiplayer experience. I've not played it multiplayer, but I can see how and I can feel how this would be a very rich multiplayer experience. As a solo game, though, it utilizes just a fraction of that game's potential, it feels like to me. And therefore, it just feels like the solo mode's tacked on as an afterthought. And it feels a little dull and flat compared to what multiplayer
Hmm.
would be. I don't know if you would agree with that or not, because you played a multiplayer, right? Do you think the multiplayer game is more fun than the
Yeah,
solo game?
definitely. This is a game that's a
Okay.
lot more
All
fun
right.
multiplayer.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I thought it was going to be crazy saying that, but I'm like, oh yeah, I guess any game you could say. Some people would say, well, any game is more fun when you multiplayer it, as opposed, that's the whole point. You solo gamers are weird. Well, any of you guys listening to this in the first place, hey, we're right there with you, man. I love being weird with solo games. So this particular one, it just felt like its strength was more for the
Yeah.
multiplayer side. So drawing buildings and apprentices are just kind of this random thing, as I mentioned. I do like the apprentices, but at the same time, they might not fit your strategy. So I kind of mentioned that in the goods here. It's kind of a balancing act, and sometimes it's just the luck of the cards, and you just get lousy cards, and you can't do anything with them. There's, as we've expounded upon, there's a lot of rules and effects throughout the game. So there's a lot to remember, especially for a solo player, because you don't have anybody sitting there going, "Hey, wait, you forgot this." You should really consider calling this game "Prisoners of the West Kingdom," just because the capturing mechanism is ubiquitous. It seems like it's always happening. I mean, as I said, I get why it's there. It makes complete sense. It makes you think twice about raking in too many resources or investing too many workers. And in a multiplayer game, I could see how that would be a huge pain in the rear, though. As I've not done the multiplayer, as I said, but just seeing you're playing with other players, somebody can be a real jerk and just take your workers and just leave them on their player board, not doing anything with them for a while. I don't know. Um, Most of the game is for me. It's just as a solo player, collect this, build that, standard worker placement fair. Nothing really exciting, but again, I'm kind of new to this, so I need to give it more of a shake. I think I just felt like there was not a lot of engine building either. I could be totally wrong on that. It just seems like you're immediately there and you're immediately doing things. So I don't know, Martin. How about you? Do you have any bads?
Yeah, I first of all, I want to say that I appreciate your perspective on this, right? Like, and I think that ultimately, folks who are listening to this podcast are getting two, I wouldn't call them diametrically opposed views, but definitely your reaction to the game is more negative than my reaction to the game. Although I do have some negatives about this game.
Right.
Okay, so my main negative about the game is that the rules could have been they make the game seem a lot more complicated than it actually is. It's actually a very straightforward worker placement game with a couple of little twists thrown in here to change up the formula. But the rules don't give you that overview before it dives into the specifics. And the rules also don't work really well as a reference while you're playing the game. It takes a lot longer and flip through pages just to be able to zoom in and answer a player's question or your own question. Or in my case, last night when I was trying to refresh it, my daughter's questions. And she has a lot of questions when we play the game, but that's
Right.
a good thing. So my main bad for this game is I wish that they had just been a little bit more thoughtful with the rules, provided an overview. My other bad for this, and I'm going to put this in the bad category, and although I qualify it, is that you're using iconography, like I said earlier, it only means something in the world of Garphill games. It doesn't, the icons themselves do not look intuitively or remind the player of something that they're already familiar with in the real world. So, that's a problem for me,
Hmm.
right? And as I said, once you're familiar with playing the game, then the icons are now familiar because you've encountered them before, and then you're okay, you're good to go. But the problem is, as I did, if you leave the game alone for a year and then pick it up after a year again, all of the icons are now unfamiliar and you have to
Hmm.
relearn them. So I was saying this last night on Facebook on Solo Board Gamers. I'm feeling like I have to relearn the entire game, and the icons aren't helping me. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And I just want to address this. Like when I was playing Viscounts a few weeks back, or trying to play it, folks were like, "Well, you've played Architects, so these icons should be familiar to you." And I'm like, "No, because I
Nope.
forgot
Right.
them. Because they do not." Anyway, I'm gonna stop banging the drum of you know what is good
Yeah.
iconography.
Well.
But yeah, it really, really bothers me, and it doesn't bother a lot of other people. So you know what? My negatives may not even matter to you folks who are listening, and that's totally
Hmm.
fine because we're all different players and different people. I know a lot of people love, 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 love this game, but so my main bads, just to summarize, are rules could have been clearer and better organized, and iconography, you know, doesn't look like anything in the real
Right.
world.
Exactly. No, it's a perfectly valid argument too. For the ugly side, I'm not sure that there's a lot of ugly per se to say, but there's quite a bit of bad, as I mentioned on my side of things, and as you said as well. None of the bad are really deal breakers, I think, or make the game unplayable. I think, as I said, as a solo experience, bottom line, I just didn't think it was great as a solo experience. I would love, absolutely love to play it multiplayer. I would love to have it as a game night. And so I'm going to hold on to it for that main reason. Solo play, I'm not sure that I would play it solo again, to be honest with you. It's obvious that this is a matter of taste and preference for a player, but if I had to name one thing as being ugly, I'd say it's that solo mode. It just doesn't feel like it's solo. It's just, as I said, tacked on experience. Martin, do you have an ugly to share?
I agree with you that the solo isn't as compelling as it could be, but I'm not going to say it's
Okay.
ugly.
No,
You
that's
know.
fine. No, I totally understand. I mean, I think I was just disappointed in that regard more than anything else. And I might try it again. I don't know. I just, like I said, I want to hang on to it for the multiplayer experience, but solo, not so much. So, stomp discussion. I can't give it a stomp. I just can't. I mean, not as a solo game. I can't give it a stomp. Martin, how about you?
I am not going to give this game the stump of approval, sadly, because if you want the stump of approval, gamers, publishers, you need to have a game with rock solid rules. You need to have a game with icons that really, are intuitive. And for me personally, I would like a game with a little more meat on the bone nowadays. But that's just a reflection of where I am in my own gaming journey. I'm starting to become more of like that, that hardcore Euro worker placement gamer with my nose up
Oh
in the
boy, here
air.
we go.
I'm looking down at you. No, I'm
No.
just kidding. But I can't leave this without saying this once again. And if you just hopefully, Michael, we're going to put timestamps on this so that people can just fast forward through all of the ranting that's happened here. And I will say this. It is Architects of the West Kingdom for me is a solid worker placement game with some twists to it, some really nice artwork. And once you get through the rules and you learn it, it's actually a very straightforward game to play. It is super fun to play multiplayer. It is an okay solo experience. And that's the bottom line. Wait, was that a Steve Austin line? Did I just steal Steve Austin's?
I don't know. I never watched wrestling. I know who the name is.
You never watched wrestling? Okay. And that's the bottom line.
That sounds funny. That's good. So, ladies and gentlemen, this wraps up episode 76 of the Solo Source podcast. Just a reminder, we are part of the Dice Tower Network, and for even more Solo Source, join our post-show discussions and other shenanigans on Facebook at facebook.com/solosource. Follow us on Instagram at Solosaurus Podcast, or you can shoot us an email at solosauruspodcast@gmail.com.
By the way, my daughter is volunteering to be our Instagram.
She's hired. I keep every time I say this at the end, I'm just like, oh, we really got to work on that, and I don't know what to put in there. I mean, Facebook is good, but I don't. Yeah, more power to her, man.
She's going to give us she's going to enhance our social profile.
Sweet. Bring it on.
Oh, okay. This is my part here. So you can also find our Solosaurus podcast on BoardGameGeek.com. If you actually use the site's navigation, you'll find us under the gaming related forum, under the subforum podcasts and blogs, and there you will find Solosaurus, or just, go to your favorite search engine and search for Solosaurus Board Game Geek. I will also mention this that I keep forgetting. The service that we use to publish Solosaurus, Libsyn, also automatically puts us on YouTube. Did you realize that?
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, you're not asking me. You're asking the audience.
I'm asking both.
Oh, well.
Because I knew this and then I forgot it, and then I'm realizing it now because I'm like, oh, my daughter was listening to Solosaurus on YouTube, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's right. You can find us on YouTube, too. So that's cool. Mm-hmm. And if you would like to sport your very own Solosaurus micro badge to show off your love and support for this show, find me on Board Game Geek. My handle is Dr. Henry Armitage. That's Dr. Henry Armitage. And I will spot you the Geek Gold so that you can have your very own Solosaurus micro badge.
And I want to also tell you guys that we are on Armchair Dragoons as well. That's armchairdragoons.com. That's a gaming website with strategy and war games, but there's quite a few other games over there talked about as well. So we've got our YouTube videos being posted to the front page of that site as well. If you want to go check them out, I'm sure Brant over there would be much appreciative, as would the rest of the crowd. Thanks again to Stone Valley Games for being our sponsor. They have given us review copies of this game. And as always, if there's any particular games that you would like us to take a look at, please don't hesitate to send us an email, or more effectively, drop us a message on social media, on Facebook. We will certainly get it immediately there. And once again, I am Michael Eckenfels.
I'm Martin Gonzalez. Hey, thanks for listening to us here on Solosaurus.